Dawson's Rambles.
Hey YouTube, Dawson Ryder here. Welcome to another My Thoughts on Video series video. That was a rude way of putting it, but I'm gonna roll with it. I'm not gonna do another take. Let's just roll with this take. Let's roll, man. I'm done with the woods. This is going to be my thoughts on all Rider forms, or all Kamen Rider final forms. I'm gonna mess up the take again. All Rider final forms, as I've been doing. I do these videos because I really like it, but I've been trying to sync some of them up with events in the show, with the debuts in Gotchard, and since we are recently debuting our final form in Gotchard, I'm giving my thoughts on all the final form suits so far from Heisei and Reiwa. Thankfully, this is one of the easier ones in terms of I don't have to have the wiki up, I pretty much remember it. There's no weird gray area ones, or at least not a lot of them. I think the only one that's a point of debate in the fandom is Puto Tira, which again, guys, it doesn't matter. If someone wants to count Puto Tira as the final form, or Super Tatabat the final form, if they want to count the Red Dragon Fire Ranger as the final form of O's, it doesn't affect your life. It's pathetic to care about. Who cares? Point is, this is an easier one, and it's also easier than like third riders and fourth riders where there's like also not these weird gray areas. So you're gonna hopefully get less actually. But anyway, let's start with the list. So starting right away, we have Kuga Ultimate. Now, I really do like Kuga Ultimate. Outside of like white toku suits, my second favorite type of toku suit is usually a black gold suit. I do have to say though that this is one of those weird ones, and this is something I've talked about before, of things that it's either a suit or a show or whatever, where it's something I really like, but I feel like on paper it should be an all-time favorite, but for whatever reason it isn't having that extra notch on the dial or whatever. And this is one of those ones. While I really like it, I feel like because of what I usually like, it should be a top 5 for me, but I only like it okay. I don't know why. Agito Shining is fine. I talked about how I'm not the biggest fan of Burning because even though I don't mind those slight evolution forms where the mid-series leads into the final, I thought it was kind of boring. Effectively, they just swap out the chest. But I do like Shining. I think it's a slick and cool looking suit. It's just never one that I've paid too much attention to. Now, Survive Mode I like alright. I'll be honest, I prefer the base form. I think that the antennas on it and everything kind of accentuate the eyes and the way the proportions are, make it almost look kind of adorable looking, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you don't really want that for a final form. But yeah, I don't know, I just prefer the base form, and this is one of my lesser favorite final forms. Not one that I overly dislike, but it's just always felt a little bit less cool than the main form. Kind of the same for Wing Knight in a way too. Like, I actually think Wing Knight's is cooler as a power-up, but I kind of prefer the simplicity of his main form. Faiz is kind of boring. I know it's not 100% only just a color swap, but it really does just feel like a color swap. It feels more akin to like an ability form where they just change out the palette and a couple armor pieces. I don't hate it, I just find it to be one of the more boring ones in the series. Blade King form on the other hand is a top 5 for me. Absolutely, I love it. It looks so badass. That royal like empowerment, I don't know why I said it like that, but it looks so great. It's a great evolution of the main suit as this great final form. It has this really intimidating, badass presence. Not to mention, I love the story context. Like, there are times where there's a form I might like okay, or maybe don't even like that much, but the story context can elevate it. And this is a case where I both like the suit and the story context elevates it. As, every time you use it, he transforms more and more into an undead, which ultimately, of course, leads to a sacrifice so that he can keep Battle Fight going forever, so that there can be peace and Chalice can be happy. So I really like this form, both for story and design reasons. Hibiki Armed, another all-time great form, just a great, just final evolution of this suit. It just kind of accentuates everything that I like about the Hibiki design. I often go back and forth on whether I like this or the main form better. Sometimes it changes, sometimes Kurenai's in the mix. It's just an overall really great, badass suit. Kabuto, on the other hand, Kabuto Hyper, I'm not the biggest fan of. It's probably one of the only ones I kind of dislike. I just find it to be kind of boring. Like, you just got the bigger antenna and kind of these gray accents and stuff. It looks a little bit cool in some instances, and there's aspects of it I like, but I don't know, I've never been the biggest fan. I always found it to be kind of boring and fugly. Den-O liner form is alright. It's kind of funny, I think that this and Trideron are kind of a similar vein, where it's kind of like an evolution of the main suit aesthetic, but then incorporating being based off of like the main vehicle of the series, being the Den liner. So I think that concept is kind of cool. It's a form where it's kind of got a little bit of that amalgam aspect going, but it's not fully fugly. I do appreciate it for what it is. I think they convey the design of the Den liner rather well. I like the idea of the form of him being able to use the Imagin's abilities without being possessed. And yeah, I like it fine. I think it's pretty successful at what it does, but it's not a favorite. Emperor form. Emperor form, I really like Emperor form. I also like the Emperor's New Groove, the movie. It's a case also where I do prefer the main form, not because like with Ryuki I think it looks cooler, but just I like something a little bit more about the chained form. I think it's got a little bit more of a gothic horror vibe, but I do really like Kiva's armor. Honestly, I like all the Kiva suit designs. Possibly my favorite ecosystem of suit designs. It's a great, badass, golden, vampiric armor. What's not to like? but also another one where I appreciate the story context. I think it's really cool that technically speaking, Emperor form is the base form or the default form, but the chained form is what he has to use because he's only half Fangire, so he can't take the full brunt until he gets Tatsalot or whatever it was called, taxes, I don't remember its name. Anyway, I like that context. DK Complete, not a fan. I'll admit at the time, this was my second Rider series I watched live, so I wasn't as overly annoyed before Toku and its fandom ground me into dust. But I'm just not a fan of the amalgam forms. I think it's really ugly. It looks like a weird collage that was made in Photoshop. I think his next one that he got in the Geo movie is even worse. Just not a fan. Doubles, on the other hand, Extreme is great. I don't know why I had to say that, but sometimes you do. Sometimes you just have to say the Toku noises when you say it. Like, this is a really random one, but whenever, for whatever reason, Robin Hood will come up, I go, Robin Hood! Anyway, Extreme. Great form, great evolution of the main form, incorporating the idea of double and now being an X, and then, the contrast of the white running down the middle of the suit works really well. No notes, great suit. Now we get to the controversy of O's, where there's a debate. Again, Puto Tira is considered the official final form. I do like Super Tatsuba though, and if you want to count that as the final form, I don't care at all. Puto Tira, though, I think is a really cool suit. It's kind of one of those things, kind of reminding me of Revice, where you take a brighter color and contrast it with a badass suit, and I like that. It's got this hulking badass, intimidation factor, but it's contrasted with the purple. It does bring up some Barney jokes, which is fun, and I like it as a final form in the sense that it's a little bit different because it was made based on metals that were made in the present day rather than the past, which was kind of cool. Also, it's got one of my favorite rider weapons of all time with its axe. Forze's is overall fine. In regards to the base suit, I do like the blue color on it. I think it's a decent final evolution. I do really like its approach to the sort of amalgam aspect, where it's just a bunch of buttons, the numbered buttons from the switches, rather than them trying to glue the switches on it. I think the way it used that was really cool, and I like that approach where it was more understated. Wizard. I love Wizard's final form. I know it's not technically a white suit, but it kind of scratches that itch of a cool slick white Toku suit. The diamond aspect obviously fitting into the whole ring thing. It just looks really cool. Like, the head maybe is a little bit goofy if you think about it too much, but overall I think it's a really slick and badass suit. Also another one with another badass axe weapon as well. Then you get into Gaim. I do like Gaim Kiwami. I appreciate it for what it is. I think it's well designed. I admit it's not my favorite though, and I was a little underwhelmed. I think primarily because Kachadoki set the bar so high, and that's probably my favorite Gaim main form, and so I wasn't as big of a fan of this one. Again, I do appreciate though its approach to the amalgam aspect, where it's another one of those forms that's meant to represent being able to use all the abilities because it can summon all the weapons, but it's just a fruit collage instead of trying to glue things to it. However, on a hypocritical note, I think there would have been an interesting form with like locks on it, like if you had them hanging off. Like, I could picture a suit where like maybe you're wearing a sash with it. That could actually maybe look kind of cool, but maybe not for the final form, but yeah. Drive. I think Trideron is a little more successful for me at the idea that liner form is pulling off, where it's an evolution of the core like aesthetics of the main suit, but incorporating the vehicle. I think it's a great mix of feeling like just this kind of final evolution of speed, but also Trideron. And I also like the idea of Belt being able to possess and fight as well. Ghost, I really do like Ghost Infinite's form. I think it's really cool. It's one of those ones kind of like Kuga Ultimate where I feel like it should be something that should be an all-timer, but I just do really like it, but it's not an all-time favorite. I think it's because I gravitate a little more towards the slightly horror Halloween vibes of Spectre and Ghost Space Form suit. But I really do like this suit. I think it's really slick and it kind of represents a little bit more of an ethereal spirit vibe, which is really neat. Ex-Aid Muteki is a really fun form. I really enjoy it. Not a top 5 favorite for mine, but I really like it. Story context-wise, I also enjoyed, even though I hate Dan Kuruto, I admittedly liked the story of them having to work together, and it did represent a few moments where I actually laughed at a couple of his bits. I wasn't immune to that. But anyway, I like the story context of Kronos being the big bad at the time, that suit was meant to be the final reward. So there was not going to be anything stronger than it because there was nothing to do after that. And so they needed to come up with something to go even further beyond. Dun, 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 dun. I like that story context, but it's also just a fun form. It's a golden predator-looking Rider final form suit. What's not to have fun with? Build Genius is one of the only amalgam forms I kind of like. Probably a little bit of bias just simply because I like Build so much, but it works a little bit better for me. It feels a little bit more streamlined compared to the other ones. Like, I think the way that the visors become the bottles is actually kind of clever. I still wish, honestly, you know what, thinking about it, I wouldn't mind forms like this existing if they weren't the final form, because final forms I feel are supposed to be this really cool final evolution, and that's the way it started out, and then when you get this ugly collage, it just kind of sucks. So I would be more than welcome to every series having an amalgam form, but just do the final form as something cool. But anyway, This is one of the ones that actually works for me. I do kind of like the contrast of the rainbowy colors of the bottles with the white colors, and I like the story context of it being about him having to work with his past self, although I still hate that they kind of nerfed what an awful person he was before. But regardless, it's still not my favorite, and I would still prefer to have something else as the final form, but I do like this one a little bit more than most. Now, Geo is an interesting case. The official final form is Grand Geo, but I am going to talk about the other sort of final forms just for the context of the story. Now, Grand Geo also hitting that territory of I'm not a fan of those ugly collage forms. There's kind of aspects I kind of appreciate, but for the most part, not a fan. I do like the idea of this form not looking like Geo because he got the drive watch in the wrong order, because he got the one from Gates and not in the right order. I thought that was kind of cool. Which makes me wish that this was like the mid-series form, the slight evolution form into the final form. Like this form would have been cool to be a lead into his true final form. And I think it makes it worse that not only isn't one of those amalgam forms I don't like, but Geo is so much of a more badass and cool final form suit with that black gold color scheme. But then you have that movie form that was like Geo Oma or whatever, which looks like the good version of Geo. I think that should have been the final form. I think it would have been cool to have Grand Geo as the lead-in, like, oh, you got the drive watch out of order. You gotta get it in the right order to evolve. And then he gets it and becomes that Geo Oma thing, and that could have represented a new future, and it would have been a lot cooler. 01, aka 02 for this, I really like the suit. Not a top 5 or anything, but I really like the simplicity. Like, I'm not a fan, as I just mentioned, of like the weird amalgam forms. Just coming off of Geo with that, it was cool to have just a really slick basic one. I believe it was another driver too, just like Ghost Damashi form was, which was neat, and it made me kind of wish that this just took over as the main suit after that. And I like that idea of them getting just the next generation suit, like it was 01, now it's 02. And I really like the simplicity of that and the concept, and it would be cool if in the future a Rider series could do that, where he just gets a full-on new suit like a superhero. Saber's final form is alright. I actually really love the Saber ecosystem of suits. This one was always just kind of okay for me though. I feel like it's a little bit, like, just too much of one color that kind of makes it a little bit boring, but I like it fine, but it's not my favorite. Then you have Revice. Revice's is okay. I think it's pretty cool looking. It's not one where I have overly negative things to say about it. It just isn't the most standout for me. The only negative thing I have to say is I wish Revi and Vice kind of both got their own unique final forms. Like, most of their other forms where they're not combined into one, like Thundering Gale, they do have their own distinct looks. And I don't mind the idea of having one where they more match up, but for the final form I kind of wanted to see a final evolution of both the individual Revi and Vice suits and the individual aspects that they both bring. But I didn't hate these. Geats is probably one of my all-time favorites as well. I think that there maybe could be a little bit of extra contrast color going on. It can sometimes seem a little bit blanket white, but for the most part, you know, Geats being one of my favorite base form suits, this just continues that. I love a good white Toku suit, and this is an excellent final evolution of it, and I love the way it says Geats 9. I just love this suit. It's so slick and badass, and yeah, probably top 5, maybe even top 1, I'm not sure. Top 1. What's your top 1 list? This. And then, of course, we have the recent Gotchard Rainbow, which I did a video giving my thoughts on already. But I do like the suit. As I've said, my problem with Gotchard has never been the suit. I think it's an overall pretty cool looking suit. I definitely prefer Platinum Gotchard and a couple of the other forms like Daybreak, but it's a good final form. And I appreciate that it's seemingly taking that aspect of kind of being a culmination of all his powers, but not in a way where they're gluing all the cards on him or gluing the chemis on him or something. But anyways, that is just my thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts on some of your favorite final forms or least favorite ones are in the comments below. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell to get notifications for my videos. Dawson Rider, signing out.